Hi guys. So today I want to talk about what I would do if I had to start training aerial from scratch. So if I didn't have the background and experience with any sort of training and didn't have any experience doing aerial, but knowing the things that I know now about movement training and aerial, this is what I would do if I was starting over so that I could build a practice that I really loved, that felt good for my body, but that also helped me to build strength, mobility, and body control in the most efficient and effective way. So I think it's important to mention that my own actual experience around coming into aerial wasn't starting completely from scratch from a strength perspective. So before aerial, I had been training a lot of weightlifting and a lot of calisthenics and body weight movements. So I'd been working on handstands for a very long time at that point, but I'd also been doing things that translate directly to aerial, like movements on rings, things like pull-ups, skin the cats, front and back levers, that sort of thing. So I wasn't starting aerial with zero strength. Now, one of the things that I learned with calisthenics in particular is that when you want to achieve a skill, you need to follow specific steps to achieve that skill. So you look at where you are in terms of your level of strength, you find the progression that matches that level of strength, and you train that until it becomes too easy, and then you move on to the next progression, like the next level. And then you gradually, step by step, work towards these bigger, more challenging skills. And you do that so that you can build strength in the right way and in a way that isn't going to cause an injury. So rather than trying to rush ahead because you're being impatient and you want the skill, you go through a set of steps. And one of the things that I found really shocking when I came into the aerial world was the fact that there were a lot of people who wanted these hard skills, but they weren't doing anything to try and achieve them. They were doing random conditioning. So every week, different conditioning exercises. There was no consistency of the same movements in order to build strength that actually would have helped them unlock these skills. And there was also this weird belief that if they just kept doing aerial and just did more aerial, eventually these skills would arrive. And in some cases, that can happen. Like if you do something for long enough and you build a base level of strength, it can unlock certain movements as a byproduct. But the harder the skill is, the longer it's going to take. So the more you can focus in on what you actually need to achieve the skill, that's going to shorten the timeline from getting from A to B. Now, why am I saying this? Because one of the first things that I would do if I was starting over from scratch with aerial is I would look at the skills that felt most important to give me a good foundational level of strength and skill to then build on. So, for example, if I couldn't do an invert, I would want to be working on all of the things that I needed to unlock a bent arm invert, right? Like a basic invert. Even if we're just talking about doing an invert from the floor, I would look at the things that I needed to have in my toolkit to start to move me forwards and to allow me to work on more challenging skills. So I would need that foundational strength for things like being able to invert, being able to comfortably hox with two legs, being able to comfortably hang from the apparatus, whether we're talking from a bar or from a vertical apparatus. So then we're also looking at pieces like the grip strength for that, right? I'd want to look at things like compression. Did I have the compression to be able to lift my legs while I'm in a hang? I would want to make sure that I was looking at things like, could I pull my body weight with bent arms? Could I pull my body weight with straight arms? I would also make sure that I felt really comfortable upside down in my inverted straddle position because that is super, super important. And so by focusing in on just a handful of skills like my invert, my inverted straddle hold, my two leg hocks, I would know the steps that I needed to work on to get to those things. And I would stay focused on that so that I could build a really good foundation so that it would then become easier to work on more challenging movements, more creative aerial work, and also sequences and flows. And I think because aerial is so broad, like we can literally train so many different movements and skills within each individual piece of apparatus, it can be so hard to stay focused with your training because it's so hard to know what you need to focus on. And the more we try and like rush to harder movements and the more we try and train as many different things as we can at once, the slower our progress actually becomes because we're not taking the time to build the necessary foundations to actually make everything that comes after that significantly easier. The second thing that I would do if I was starting over with aerial is I would be strength training off the equipment. And really, if you're doing any sport whatsoever, this should be a part of your training week. There is no other sport where people don't train in the gym or gym movements but at home to build a body that has a better level of strength and a better capacity to support the sport. And aerial is no different. If we want to be doing crazy things with our bodies, pulling ourselves around, some of the dynamic tricks that you can do put an enormous amount of strain on our joints and connective tissue. We should be lifting weights and strength training to support all of this, just to build a stronger, healthier body that can cope with the demands of aerial. So I would keep this really simple. I would cross train using kettlebells because that's what I enjoy doing. You don't have to lift the heaviest weight on the planet, but you do need to lift enough weight that it actually creates some level of resistance for your muscles, your joints, and your connective tissues. And I would probably do this maximum of 2 times a week. I would also work on mobility and maybe I'd include that alongside the strength training or I'd do a separate session, but just making sure that I was building strength in my end ranges of motion as well. And again, this is to support all of the skills that I would be doing in the air in my aerial. And so those are the two main things that I would focus on. I would look at the skills that would give me the best foundation for training harder movements from. And I would look at training off the equipment to build a stronger body that supported everything I wanted to do in the air. It's not really that complicated, but it can feel very, very overwhelming as to know what it is specifically that you need because there is obviously so much information out there. And so, if you feel like having some guidance around your training would be helpful, one of the things that I personally think is really fantastic to get started with straight away, no matter where you are in your aerial journey, is your off apparatus strength training. So, your cross training. And I have a 12-month cross training program that I specifically designed for the aerialist who wants to get strong and build a solid foundation that is actually going to last rather than working on something that is just 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. You have a program that actually supports you over a long enough period of time to really see results and also to create results that are going to stay with you for longer after the program. You can check all of the details for this in the link below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.